back to another episode of the CrossFit Harrow podcast, episode number 82. And today we have Jed. Jed, thank you very much for joining us. First question goes out to everyone is why CrossFit Harrow? What brought you here?
I live nearby. I mean, yeah, like done CrossFit a lot before moving to London. I moved to London in 2019.
Okay, so just before like the whole
stuff, and before that I was living in France for a little bit, near to Paris, and I did CrossFit there, and I really enjoyed it. Before that I wasn't doing CrossFit. I feel like I'm going backwards. I should have started at the beginning and gone forwards, really, shouldn't I? But no.
We'll figure it out.
Before that, like, I was at this independent gym called Graft House in Leeds. They've got an Instagram page.
Is that where you're originally from?
No, I'm from Hull.
Hull. Okay.
Yeah, so that's where I first did CrossFit, but that was before I moved to Leeds. Graft House is this amazing independent gym. Just a great facility, loads of I think they've got 4 or 5 lifting platforms with power racks, and then they've got a sled pushing bit of fake grass, and they've got
space,
they've got loads of stuff. It's really fun. And before that, I was using the gym at my former school, the Morley Academy, which was not very good, but they did have a Smith machine and a cable machine, and
I suppose at that age though, that's kind of what we look for, isn't it? We look for when you go to a gym at was it about 16?
No. This was this was so I didn't really get into despite doing just every possible sport growing up, I didn't really get into going to the gym until I finished university. And the reason I started going to the gym was really because by the end of the university experience, I was pretty unhealthy, to be honest. I was why
is it a culture of being unhealthy?
I'm not really sure. I think you're immature. It's the first time you've lived
away.
Yeah, and you're making it. All of your choices are your own, and me, for example, I played rugby from the age of 4, but I went down to the rugby club before that because that's what my dad did, so I was almost his choice that then got turned into something that I did. And then you make these choices for yourself, the world's so open, the world's your oyster, that I think you're almost spoiled for choice. I certainly experimented in some things that I perhaps shouldn't have. I'm not afraid of admitting that. By the end of university, we'd been through some personal bereavement in the family as well, which didn't really help, I don't think, but I was really unhealthy. I was I am a sort of, the ectomorph body type, and obviously if I don't train and work on my fitness, I kind of get skinnier and skinnier, really. So I was I think I was just under 10 stone by the end of university, which is pretty, I was just not healthy, and I thought, right, I'm gonna sort myself out, because I stopped playing sport really at university as well. And I think that was just because I didn't meet anyone else who was interested in the sport. They were, but not to the same level as me. And I just didn't quite fall in with the crowd of the sporty people, and rugby at university, there's a lot of negative stuff associated with it, hazing and initiation ceremonies.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about them. They're quite big in football as well, I think.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I did play a lot of football, but I purely played it for school. I played one season, where I actually played for a team. Alongside playing rugby kind of at the same time as well. And I just, it really sort of switched me off from it. I was I just don't want to do it. And I'd got a bit fed up with rugby, and I wish I'd got into going to the gym sooner, because that's what I needed to do. Ultimately, looking back, when I was 15, 16, maybe even 14, and I was good at rugby, and I was playing maybe the edges of representative teams, and was really quite a good player, playing in a really good team. But I didn't realise what else I had to do outside of it in the professional era to almost like maybe make a career out of it or to go even further.
I suppose you're not supposed to know, right? You're not.
No, yeah, and I mean, nobody ever really taught me as such. My mum was always very against me as a teenager, like doing any kind of heavy lifting and stuff. She was like, you know, it's not good for you, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't know why she thought that. I mean, maybe there's some truth in it. Obviously, if you sort of do things with poor technique, we all know that you can get injured and stuff like that. Yeah, and I think, you know...
as a kid, you've got no fear.
Yeah.
So that risk of injury is probably even greater, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, I suppose, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I do regret not basically training earlier. But yeah, as I say, I played loads of sports. As I got a little bit older, it was like the rugby teams I was playing for were kind of forcing us to go into the gym a little bit, but they weren't really teaching us how to, say, like, put together a program to, like, improve our strength. They weren't really teaching us about, well, you know, this is how many calories a normal person kind of eats in a day. If you want to put on, like, a significant amount of mass, you're going to need to eat roughly in this range. And you're going to need to do these exercises, and you're going to need to do these rep ranges, and you're going to need to repeat these things. And I had to figure all that out for myself, like, much later. So I sort of missed a trick there, and I do regret it, but
I actually think that that's actually quite a big issue in itself, because even you said that you played at certain levels and representative levels and stuff, but even from a grassroots, I know that's the whole fun of it, the whole purpose of it is for enjoyment.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the issues, is that if you don't understand why or how, then that's probably going to have a little bit of problem, like later on, to the point where you are at a good level, and the difference maybe between you getting to the next was all that information. You're probably not the only person in that. No. I would actually say I had a bit of some experience with football.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. Yeah, and I think it really switched me off from rugby. I was like, for some reason, like, people were getting bigger all around me. I wasn't, and it was like, you reach a sort of certain age level where you get up towards the Colts as well, where there's, unless you're playing in a big club or in an area where, like, and I always played rugby union, not rugby league, which is unusual for someone from Hull, because it's on the M62, where, like, just rugby league is king, basically. Okay. So, yeah, like, I couldn't seem to make I couldn't seem to make the jump up to meet the physicality demand of even, like, not even professional rugby. I suppose it was sort of, the club that I was playing at was, like, when I was in the Colts, was Hull RUFC, and they're like National 3 kind of thing. So
it was the closest you could possibly get at that time.
Yeah, I mean, but I wasn't playing for the first team. You know, I think I maybe was on the bench for the second team, like, once. You know, and I was 17, 18, mainly playing in the third team, and, you know, I would train with the first and second team, and again, it was just like there was such a gulf between me and them. I honestly started to wonder how I could ever sort of bridge the gap between me and some of these gargantuan, like, monstrous guys, you know, and it's just switched me off. I just thought, I don't know, I didn't know how I was ever gonna, you know, like, meet that physical demand, and I sort of lost the sort of self-belief that you need to play a sport like rugby, where it's very
demanding.
Yeah, physically and mentally.
But I think there's been a lot of changes to sport in general, not just rugby. I think most sports, if not all, that now is spending more time of actually what you do off the pitch or off the track or whatever, off the court, to improve other areas of the game. So I think I would imagine that was like in late 90s, early 2000s. Is this the kind of times we're talking about?
Yeah, I suppose so. Like, when did I go to uni? I'm 28, so 2011.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I was a teenager, like, playing the highest level of sports that I've really ever played, like, you know, was that teenage age group kind of level between, like, you know, under 13s and about under 17, 18s. And yeah, I was doing all sorts of stuff. Like, I was skateboarding and like smoking, not like all the time or anything, but like doing like underage drinking, all of these silly things.
I think we've all gone.
Yeah, I think we all have, but like those things for some reason were like came easy, and I think I even would have done less of those things if somebody had just sort of said
direction.
Just giving you direction, not even necessarily having to be there, but just saying like, okay, so, you know, we do training twice a week, we play on weekends.
This is what you need to do in between.
Yeah, exactly. Just even having that conversation, I don't even think that conversation was ever had.
Yeah.
You know, because again, with rugby, the thing is, it was only made professional in 1995. So like a lot of the guys who were our coaches had you know, grown up with the game when it was purely amateur.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, the change.
But I think they've realised, like, over the last decade of how important being like a full-rounded individual sports person is. And you know, growing up roughly the same times, I very much remember too that it was a lot of it was like on the pitch of like drills and plays that we would do to beat an opponent, but actually like we didn't actually spend much time. I was just like a small teenager. I wasn't at all big in height nor width, and I'm still not big in height. And I was never taught, you know, it got to even up until like 18, I think I was starting to question, like yourself, like why are these conversations never being said? Because you kind of just end up then, a lot of people just fall off then and they stop playing team sports, or whether they're good or whether they're not so good at that sport. It's just bridging that gap. Those conversations don't get they're not said, they're not had.
I think that's definitely true. And I started, you know, like I said, I started going to the gym, end of university. It was like exercise for less, you know, and I used to go and I used to do a couple of the classes. Like I used to do like the circuit training class, for example, and they did it like twice a week. So I thought, well, if I go and do that, and then I kind of knew how to like deadlift and squat a little bit and stuff like that, but I wasn't really programming it as such. I was like, and if I try and do a little bit of that in between, then I'll get fit, you know, I'll get fitter and stronger. And I did to an extent. And I remember like, I think I joined the gym, and when I joined, they were like, oh, we've got no one to do your induction at the moment, but you've been in the gym before, you've played sports, so we're happy for you to use the gym and do the classes and stuff, whatever. And then basically when someone's here, you know, it was, you know, one of the managers or something was like, I'll sort you out with a personal trainer and they'll do a little induction with you. I was like, okay. And it was this guy called Pete. I remember him. He had like arms as thick as me legs. And he said, he obviously saw that I'd, you know, done sports and stuff like that before, and I was relatively fit. And, you know, the exercise for less was like, obviously lots of people going in there to use the machines, the casual gym goers, as I will refer to them as just now, you know, the people who, you know, use the step machine, do a bit of walking, a bit of running, a bit of cycling, rowing. And then there's, you know, the more sort of hardcore group who are going there to essentially bodybuild. Most of them, they're doing bodybuilding, you know, they're going and they're...
That's what all it was known, really. It was what you were one or the other.
Yeah, basically, and that was it.
Spin group too. There was also
and this guy was like, well, you know, look, I do this thing called CrossFit. Like, you should look it up. I think you might be interested in it. And sure enough, I did, and I went and joined like CrossFit Hull, and that was where I started doing it.
So Pete introduced you?
Yeah, this guy called Pete. Yeah. I don't know what he's doing now. I'm not in touch with him or anything. He was just like seemed like a nice guy, you know. And he was a personal trainer into his fitness. I hope he's gone and done his, you know, CrossFit certifications and stuff, because he
led by example.
Yeah, because he clearly enjoyed it as well. And then I started playing rugby again, because I was like, I'm starting to feel fitter and stronger, and I started to feel like a bit more sort of a bit more confidence in my physical strength, mainly, like in my strength. And I thought, you know, and the reason I did that was like, you look back and it's like, I've played rugby since I was like 4 years old, and I never really played in positions where it was like, brute force positions. Obviously, you only have to look at me to probably know that. And I spent all these hours of like working on these skills and building up these skills and instincts, training these instincts into myself. And I was just like, it's just a waste if I don't do it now. It's just a complete waste. Like all of those hours spent. And I loved it. I loved it. And I managed to re-find kind of enjoyment out of it, which was, I found like amazing, because if you'd have asked me like midway through university, I'd be like, probably never play rugby again, and now I'm playing it again now. I've had a few injuries over the years, and again, I've never played it to like a particularly high standard since I was a teenager. But
you've just made a really good point and made me rethink quite a lot. And even for a lot of people, where you said that you spent all that time fine-tuning those skills, creating those, those skills and developing them for that sport. Why would you waste them?
And like, it does bring you like, there's nothing like executing a skill. Why do people like bake or sew or whatever? And those people spend hours, honing those skills, building up those skills.
And they don't do it half-heartedly.
Exactly.
They'll get the right ingredients, whatever they need. They'll spend that time, turn the phone off.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I've managed to kind of find enjoyment in that. Again, for a long time, I thought about doing the refereeing qualifications and becoming a ref, because I'm a bit of a nerd about rugby. Like, I know all the rules and like everything like that.
But it's also looking at it from a different perspective, right?
And I always played like, again, like scrum half, fly half. The higher standard I played, I often played in what they call a back three, so full back or wing, because there were people who were probably a bit more, usually, not necessarily I would say always more skillful than I was, but they were probably slightly more dynamic athletes. And if you play fly half or scrum half, you play close to the ball a lot. And also there's a lot of big angry men close to the ball. So being that bit more powerful and dynamic is usually quite a useful sort of physical attribute. So, sort of lost what I was saying.
But that's an interesting. That's still really stuck with me about learning that skill and refining that. And even from if you want to bring it back to kind of the whole CrossFit experience and people doing that, and they, I want to learn this. I want to learn how to do a pull up. I want to learn how to snatch and stuff. Well, if you do.
You know what?
We can absolutely teach you.
I think that was a huge part of the appeal, like, to me as well. The fact that there were so many different skills to learn. Like, you might have seen, I like juggling, for example.
That was one of the very first things I'd noticed about you.
Sort of things like that. Just, I do like learning skills. I think that is also kind of one of the reasons why I don't think I'll ever be a CrossFitter who wants to like do competitions and things like that, because even though I do acknowledge, and I acknowledge that there are lots of skills involved, like ultimately it's a test of like fitness and strength. It is a test of your skills, and that's a big part of it. But everybody has also got those skills. And the thing that kind of wills out is usually somebody's fitness and strength, as well as being able to execute, the movements precisely and efficiently. But I much prefer competing in a field where there's like lots more uncertainty. There's loads of different outcomes. Like, you never know.
Rugby pitch.
Yeah, or football. I've played loads of football, like as an adult actually as well, like casually, sort of 8-a-side, 5-a-side. And I do really like it.
It is fun,
but I hate football as a whole kind of thing.
Well, I find that growing up, you're either a rugby man or you're a football man, or rugby person, football person.
Like, my dad played rugby, always played rugby, but he's a die-hard Evertonian. He's got a season ticket. Every other week he'll drive over from like the opposite side of the country in Lincolnshire to watch Everton and Liverpool, with his partner Caroline. They love it. But he always played rugby. I mean, I think he played it for different reasons to me. I can't like support football. I just can't. I just think it's just awful. There are so many things about it. Just, organised violence and...
Yeah, still a big thing to this day.
Yeah, sort of just the complete lack of like humanity and respect for other human beings over sort of... People call it tribal. I actually think it's worse than tribal. Like, you could actually almost like form a good relationship with a neighbouring tribe, I think. Whereas like in football, it's just like, no, we want to, they're scum, they're this.
You've only got to watch the telly, like a game to
the way
someone
that,
miss an opportunity and there's a fan in the background doing X,
but
Y, and Z.
It's not even the fans either, it's the players. If you want to literally just see like humankind at its absolute worst, just, go and watch a Premier League football match on the weekend, like, because the players act like not very well, I'm going to say, in my opinion, just to keep it tame. They're swearing at the referees, they're...
Lack of respect.
Yeah, just the way they behave towards one another, and then...
Obviously, a die-hard football fan will have the same views, or same passion for football that you do for rugby, would say that it would happen in other sports too.
But it doesn't.
As much. I agree it doesn't.
It just doesn't. Like, when you go and watch rugby, there's no home and away end. You could be literally sat next to somebody who supports the opposite team. When you go and watch rugby, you're allowed to drink in the stands because people know that, like, they're not going to throw projectiles onto the pitch.
But there seems to be this culture around football that it's away fans, home fans.
Well, I really don't know where it went wrong, but I wish it would change because it's an amazing game, and I love playing it, love watching it. Like, I do. I mean, it's, in terms of skill level, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a game that is such a mix of like physical attributes and skill. Like,
what's the highest performing rugby players, like star? What's their highest like salary base?
Oh, I mean, that's difficult to say. I suppose...
Does it compare anywhere near football?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think what footballers get in a week, what top footballers get in a week, most rugby players are maybe getting in 6 months to a year. Like, most rugby players like have to work after they've finished. I mean, I think if you play anything up to championship level and you've been anything close to smart, you shouldn't need to work for the rest of your life, really, should you? Like,
yeah, I mean, this could be part of the problem as to why there is a lack of respect or things on the pitch and stuff, or why footballers conduct themselves maybe the way they do.
I think it's also because they do get taken out of school very early.
Yeah, some as early as like 12.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen kids getting taken out of school, especially around 14.
Yeah, generally the 14 mark.
Yeah.
The reason I said 12 is the earliest I've seen is 12, but yeah, 14 teams.
And that's just not right. That's gonna...
They're still learning quite a lot about like themselves, that like socially.
Yeah, exactly. It's the social aspects. Like, they've not really learned how to socialise beyond the level of an adolescent. So perhaps it's not surprising that.
And then that becomes all they know. That's what football or rugby is. All they know.
I think rugby is very different. I mean,
I don't know about rugby. I'd leave that.
I think I'd probably say, well, first and foremost, like, it's still regarded as elitist sport. I mean, I think at the top level, it perhaps is. I think in the West Country, in the Southwest, there's a lot more like working class people who play it.
I'd say it's a gentleman's game, right? No.
Yeah, I mean, obvious. Well, the way the sport itself actually developed was a couple of the more famous sort of ancient private schools like Rugby, Eton, Harrow. They had their own versions of like sort of that of football, but the kind of old sense of football where it was like one village against another and there'd be a ball in the village and it'd be, the medieval sense. Yeah. And rugby school, their version of this kind of, I think they called it muscular Christianity, it was some guys, I can't remember the name of the guy, but I'm pretty sure he was the headmaster at rugby school, and he sort of revolutionised education in a way, because he started bringing sports into school. And prior to that, I think sport had just been sort of things that you could gamble on, really. So like horse racing or cards or whatever. Sport had never really been what we perceive it as today. And rugby school, their version of the game became the most popular version. And then there were the gentlemen's clubs of the 19th century. These schoolboys who'd all been to public schools together and, perhaps were minor peers, so they had big country houses, and then they'd come into the cities and stay at their club. They started developing rugby teams and playing each other in London, Harlequins, Wasps, Saracens being some of the oldest ones, I think. And then it sort of grew from there. But then there was the split, mainly caused by football becoming professional.
And rugby still wasn't at that time. Well,
Rugby wasn't.
95.
Because essentially, I think the members of the elite did not really want to mix with, the lower middle class or working class individuals, and by keeping the game as an amateur game, and they, you could only really play it if you could afford to take a day off to play and maybe a day off to train. Now, obviously, working class people in the 19th century would have worked 7.5 days a week and took a half day off maybe to go to church or something. They wouldn't have stopped working. Like, the concept of the weekend did not exist, really, at that time if you were a working class person.
That's interesting. I wonder when that came in.
I mean, and I think you'll find it was probably, like, during the period of, Industrial Revolution where,
Didn't Henry Ford, am I right in saying Henry Ford made the 9-to-5?
Possibly. I don't know. I mean, he's American. I know much more about British history than I do American.
Is that what you studied at uni?
No, I studied English literature at uni. But I think you inevitably study history when you study literature. Yeah. Because the two are parallel. So these guys, these middle class guys could afford to, or upper class guys could afford to, take a day off and have a game of sport, and working class people couldn't. But the working class people wanted to do that, and the reason football was sort of more popular for a lot of working class men, of course, was that it became professional very early. So your team, your club, was willing to pay you a day's wages to come and play, because they'd have fans coming to watch, they'd have a gate, they'd have money to pay the players. Now, I think that is why rugby league also, which became professional very early, kind of came about, because and why it's again so popular in the north, because I think you take a place like sort of Leeds or Manchester as an example. They were, prior to the Industrial Revolution, like, not really that much bigger than villages. Yeah. They were not big places, but all of a sudden, when they can be there, the sort of inland canal routes can be exploited, and they can start to build mills and draw people in from the countryside to work in these factories and manufacturing and stuff. Like, they just boom. And you've got these people who want to play sport and they're interested in sport, which is like this growing fascination. And then, there was this desire for the people who invented, I suppose, rugby to sort of keep it as their own. And the working class people sort of rebelled against that by either saying, right, we're going to play football, or we're going to play rugby league, which you're allowed to be a professional in, you're allowed to get a day's pay for, basically. And they obviously couldn't necessarily afford to take a day off just to play rugby union, which is quite an interesting thing, quite a sad thing, but I suppose not really a surprising thing in the context of British history.
For those listening though, what can you tell them the difference between union and league?
Yeah, well, one is 13 players, one's 15. I think that's actually quite practical in terms of separating the two games as, yet again, kind of more of perhaps a working class game and a middle class game. I, for example, went to just like a state school in the north. I didn't go to a private school. I just played rugby union because that's what my dad played. We played rugby league because we only had school minibuses. You could only fit 15 on a minibus. So you could have 13 players, and two subs, yeah. if we'd have wanted to play rugby union, we would have had to hire a coach, like, and I don't necessarily even think the school could like afford to do that, you know, so, or take too many buses. But then, you know, obviously you said you worked in a school before, right? So you've got multiple fixtures on any night of the week, different year groups, girls teams as well. So, you know, that was another thing that like makes it impractical, I suppose. So I think it is still a bit of an elitist sport, but I don't know. I can't help but like it. I think the people who are at the top of the game, you know, I mean, FIFA FIFA are like an organisation. I can't even remember the bloody acronym now, but it's the IRB, International Rugby Board. They're a charity.
Oh right.
Yeah. So they're all about like just growing the game, you know, like, and helping people play the game as like a form of expression, or perhaps as a professional career for some people, but also as like a sort of just like a general positive force in people's lives. Again, given, like we talked earlier about, you know, what do you do in between? Well, in nations where, you know, they don't have sport established in the same historic way as we have it established as a nation now. I know that sport is like a transversal thing. It is played across the world. Different areas of the world have these different sports, but I think genuinely, like, in certain parts of the world, they don't have sport like we have, you know, and they don't have
definitely
things
not
like
the same resources that we have.
And I think, you know, the IRB try to grow the sport. You know, that's not what FIFA are trying to do. FIFA are trying to take backhanders off, you know, off like oil, like people who own oil fields, or, you know, so they could hold the next big World Cup there or something like that, so that we can see England fans, you know, disgrace themselves yet again, kind of thing. It's like
but where did because you're a secondary English teacher and teaching. Teaching English to French students, or teaching?
Yeah, well, I teach like bilingual students, really. They're half English, half French. Like, so I do teach one group this year for the last year of the French baccalaureate, which is just French school's different. It's set up different. Everybody stays till they're 18.
Okay. That's compulsory, right?
Yeah. And there's different types of lycée. There's like lycée général, which is like general school, where if you want to be a doctor, or like if you want to go to uni, that's where you go. And then there's lycée technical, which is like more vocational courses for people who want to be joiners, plumbers, builders, working construction, whatever. So lycée begins at the end of what we would call year 10.
Okay.
And before year 10 for them, that's collège. So our like high school, if you like, bit of an American term, but like high school is obviously like year 7 to year 11. There's like sixième to troisième, which is year 7 to year 10. And then they have this weird year of like their year 11 where there's no exams or anything like that. And it's supposed to be a year where they like get used to almost studying things at a slightly higher level, but they don't really. Like, it's just a bit like a nothing year. And then it gets really hard for them, basically, in the last 2 years of school. They do lots of different subjects in the French bac still. They've reformed it so that they actually do less subjects now, but they used to do like 10 or 12 different subjects.
Wow.
So it was a bit like GCSEs, but
on steroids.
Higher up, yeah. And I think the level was maybe similar to that of GCSE, maybe apart from at the very, very top, you know.
Okay.
And there used to be 3 different streams in the French bac. You could either do L, which was like arty. I think it's literature. It's like the arty option, and then there's ES, which is like economic science, and then there's S, which is science, and that's gone now because everybody basically used to. If you did L, you were just like a laughing stock, you know, like nobody did L. So it was all about either doing, you know, OS or S. And that's kind of gone now, and they choose specialities instead, which is a better model, but it's causing a lot of French teachers a massive headache because they've reformed everything, obviously, and they've not been super. It's not like they've already had the plan and then they've just hatched it and it's all laid out for everyone. It's kind of like they've been like, this is what we want to do, now we're going to do it, but we're not quite sure how it's going to work yet. Like, that seems to be like, but we will be sure how it's going to work by the time the kids do the exams, and everyone's like, well, thanks guys, that's really helpful, you know. So it's interesting and different.
What made you get into teaching?
Well, I could have just as easy got into something like nursing or social work. Like, my mother was a nurse and then she worked in a university teaching nurses. My dad was a social worker and then he worked in a university teaching social policy, you know, to do with child protection, but in all kinds of different workplaces. Like, someone like you, for example, could be in one of my dad's lectures because you might have to have a child protection policy here. Mm-hmm. So, like, I suppose they were both teachers as well, and, you know, they both worked a lot of hours. But, you know, university campus is a place where you can hide a child quite well, I think, you know, in offices or like on fields and things like that, especially in holidays. So maybe that kind of like rubbed off on me a little bit. I always thought, like, I was never like brilliant at like anything. I was always like quite good at like most things.
Amongst the pack, kind of.
Yeah. I was never amazing at like anything, but I was like good at most things. I got good GCSE results. My A-level results were not quite as good, but again, I think that was down to distractions that probably should not be mentioned on this podcast. And you know, just like, I wanted to do something that like was at least sort of felt worthwhile in terms of like making a bit of a difference to other people. Like, you know, I think it could have been the fire brigade, it could have been the police, like I said, it could have been nursing or social work or something like that. I could never see myself doing something just for money. You know what I mean? Like,
which I think is amazing that you feel like that, because I feel a lot of people are unfortunately in the position where they look at a job, and I was having this conversation recently. A lot of people get into work because just for the pure reason of funding, whether it be a lifestyle or just to pay for certain things.
Yeah.
So if you look at, let's say you go shopping in a shopping centre and you look in
I can't remember the last time I did that.
In retail, there are definitely people that take retail very, very seriously and work their way up and want to do it as a career. You know, whether it be design, some sort of fashion, they want to look store, like there's skills in that. But there equally are also people at the age of 16, 17 who wish to take up a part-time job. And these industries maybe just look to take them on in the sense that they just need to earn money. So to be able to do a job that you want to make a difference and not just do one for the sake of doing it, I think is admirable.
Well, I did work in retail while I was a student.
I mean, I've been there.
And I think
we all fall into that trap, I think.
Well, I mean, I was never going to be a long-term thing for me. It was never going to be a long-term thing for me. I always knew in my mind that I was not going to do it. I was fortunate in that my teaching opportunity came from working in the shop that I was working in, and my old head teacher came in and more or less offered me a job over the counter. You know, she was like, "What are you doing in here?" And I was like, "Well, I'm just about to finish my degree." I was, you know, and I'd been doing, I'd perhaps unbeknownst to her, she must have known, I suppose, because I suppose if you're a head teacher, you really need to know everything that's going on. But I did used to go back and volunteer at my old school in the summers.
Yeah, amazing.
And I mainly did it because I thought I'd been such a pain in the arse at school that I thought, like,
to give back.
Yeah, really. I honestly did. I was like, I've been so bad. Like, if I can just go and like help them out with like maybe some other pain in the arse now, then maybe it's like sort of karma, like balancing out my karma, like. And I didn't really do it like because I thought I wanted to be a teacher, and that's the God's honest truth. I didn't really do it like because I thought, teaching's what I want to do as a career. I didn't know what I wanted to do as a career, but I thought it was something like worthwhile, and
it was impactful.
And I wasn't doing like anything else with my time at that stage in life. And like I said, I was always all right at school. You know, I knew. And I liked it, I think. I liked it. I did like it. I like learning stuff.
Developing those skills that you said.
Yeah. Or just gaining knowledge. Like just gaining knowledge, just knowing things.
That's important.
Yeah.
I think there comes to a certain point where sometimes we stop learning, and then you kind of get a bit of a stalemate with yourself because you feel like you're not improving, or maybe sense of purpose changes, or lose that sense of purpose.
Yeah, I think that's where like work-life balance is important.
Yeah.
Because you can very easily do too much of work, and then those other kind of pursuits in life kind of just go out the window, and you become a bit too happy, just like
agreed.
Not really doing that much with your time outside of work. I definitely found that difficult when I started being a teacher. Definitely.
Well, I think that might go back to the point of before. If you lose that work-life balance, it can become a bit like monotonous, and it's the same thing over and over again. You kind of lose the sense of purpose of why you're in your job. You've chosen, not you specifically, but people generally choose that career most of the time because they want to be impactful on someone else. They've got a skill at that.
Yeah.
Then it comes to a point, if you lose that work-life balance, that actually you're just doing it more of a chore and because you have to, as opposed to anything else.
Definitely. I mean, I think in my profession, something that thankfully is being talked about more and more is work-life balance. And I think in teaching, perhaps historically, it went from
6-week holiday,
maybe too much of a work-life, maybe a work-life over balance, like of stories of like going to the pub at lunchtime and stupid stuff like that, which I'm sure most teachers weren't doing, but some perhaps were. To like obviously the Ofsted high performance academy model, where like even now people are working their brains out, like under lots of pressure and lots of stress. And now I think the unions and stuff like that are starting to talk a lot more and push a lot more work-life balance, but the Conservatives have just brought up potential legislation to be voted through, which basically changes the amount of hours that teachers can work in a year, which I don't know whether it releases I need to read more about it. I don't know whether it releases the cap altogether or whether it sort of increases the cap of hours that you can work in a kind of academic year, which would mean that they could force teachers
it's 39 weeks, isn't it? The academic, is it 39?
Yeah, but the way that they work it out is apparently, and I've only really learned it from actually reading into this, like potential legislation change. It's how many hours you work in that academic year. And there is a cap, obviously, and then it's sort of divided in your timetable.
I've seen that before.
Actually. And that's worrying,
because each curriculum has a certain amount of hours dedicated to.
And I mean, and a lot of things that the Conservatives are doing / have done are worrying. But this is not a political podcast.
I've been told never to talk about politics, don't know enough, but I do have certain views too. Jed, what's the plans for you for the next 6 months, whether you've got own personal plans through work or aspirations or even fitness wise?
Get through the rugby season, obviously grassroots sport has just sort of started again. I'm playing for a first team, but they've only got one team at the moment, and they're a low-level first team. They probably wouldn't like me saying that, but it's kind of true. And I think we need to get to the end of the season and not get relegated, really. That's kind of the goal at the moment, because I think we are in a league with a few more established clubs. And the location of our club, you've got like Ealing Trailfinders on one side, you've got Harrow on the other side. We're right in between. They're then probably going to never really have a minis and junior section because they're like these, Ealing clubs, are like a mega club, I enjoy that, and try and enjoy the season right up to the end, try and play better, because I don't think I've really only played like about 2.5 hours of rugby since 2018 so far, since the beginning of September. So I think there's a lot more to come as far as that goes.
Yeah,
and it's only a hobby, it's not, like I say, it's not like a high level pursuit or anything, but I still want to do it well. I very much do CrossFit to like supplement like other things as well, like rugby, but it makes me feel better sort of physically and mentally. I'm very much like a creature of routine, and we talked about this ages ago.
Yeah.
I think again, maybe that's one of the reasons why teaching again sort of suits me. You've got a routine, you've got a timetable, it doesn't really change week to week, and I feel very like comfortable when I've got those like things that stay the same kind of thing, and I can just change, a little bit of variety. Manage your time around it. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I've got a year 11 class and a year 13 class this year, so I've got to get those guys through their exams, and I want them to do as well as possible. That's very important. I've got to be super serious about that. I'd
imagine there's quite a bit of pressure from parents too, and
yeah, well, I think I just put it on myself really. Like I just think
it's a reflection of you as a teacher, right, as well.
No, I don't view it like that. No, I don't view it like that. Because things can. I don't like getting into that mindset of the results of your class are a reflection of you. Because so many things can happen in life that either the kids' lives or your life as a teacher, you imagine if you have some kind of, underlying health issue or something, you're never going to do as well that year. So I don't like thinking like that. I like thinking, you want to do your absolute best for the kids, and some years your absolute best might be better than other years, and you've got to try and obviously build as much consistency, and you've got to keep growing as a professional and trying new things, seeing what works for you, not just staying the same, bearing in mind that the kids are going to change and that philosophies and attitudes and strategies of education are going to change, and trying to keep learning about those is important. It's really important, I think. And I think that's one thing actually that was better when I was working in the state sector was the level of sort of CPD and
for teachers.
Yeah, was actually very, very good. It was very good. It was better than in any of the independent schools I've worked in, I must admit.
That's interesting, yeah.
And I think that might be because in independent schools you've perhaps got a few more resources. So when you've got less resources in the state sector, you've got to be a bit more creative maybe, or something like that. So I don't know. I think I actually just finished my masters. I don't know what I've got in it yet, but I did it in English and creative writing. I didn't want to do it in education because
that's such a huge topic.
Well, yeah, and also I thought I only teach one subject at the end of the day, so maybe I'm better at just studying that subject even more, it sort of just made a bit more sense to me. I think perhaps if I was at a time in my life where I had more of an aspiration to move up the ladder in terms of like management roles within the school, maybe more of an understanding of education could be better, but at this stage I'm not really looking to do that.
When you get the results of your masters?
I don't really know. I've literally, it was hard. I persuaded my old university, the University of Hull, where both my parents worked, and where I actually studied myself, which is a great university. I didn't want to study there initially, but it was my insurance choice, and I actually went to uni the year before there was the jump in fee prices. I was like the last year of the $3,000.
3 to 9.
Yeah. So it was super competitive, as I'm sure you can imagine. Not many people were taking gap years that year. But yeah, I'm really glad I went there. But I persuaded them to let me do this sort of masters in research, mostly remotely. I went in a little bit, and I attended some stuff online during lockdown and stuff. But with lockdown as well, it made it hard to follow what I was supposed to be doing. But because I was doing it in research, it just meant I had time, which was nice. And yeah, I've finished it. I don't expect to be, setting the world alight with my amazing results, but as long as I pass, I think I'll be happy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I quite enjoyed it. I did it in a topic that I'm personally interested in. So it was in sort of this, I'm calling it a movement. It's a bit of a movement now more than a subgenre. So it's cli-fi, which is climate change fiction. Often, a lot of the time, it's within the realms of like science fiction, sometimes fantasy, and what they call speculative fiction, which is like science fiction that could really happen.
Okay.
But often, well, nowadays with like climate change being such a headline concern, it's kind of like infiltrating the mainstream a little bit. There's a lot more like mainstream fiction that's sort of addressing problems to do with climate change or like changing environments. Climate change is kind of maybe a theme within the book or something. So yeah, I found that super good, but I am glad it's finished. I mean, I got my, it's actually the third house I've owned in Sudbury Hill, and it was like a wreck when I got it. Complete rip out, like new kitchen. We actually moved the bathroom from one room to another because the room that the bathroom was in, I think it was like a cottage, like maybe like a 2 up, 2 down, and then they would have built extensions on the back, probably when they turned them into council houses, I assume, at some stage, because this is like a late 19th century terraced house. Yeah.
So that's a bit of a project for you.
Yeah, I mean, mostly it's done. Like, mostly it's fine, but there's, you get to the sort of final little polishing bits, the last almost like 2%, the decorating and the, making it look super nice. I want to carry on doing that. I also bought this land behind my garden, which was, oh my God, a mistake. Because little did I know, it just looked like this, like my house sort of backs onto playing fields, right? So I was like, and there was like, the garden was like fenced off, and I could see that next door's garden either side went right the way back to the playing fields, and like behind mine was just like bushes. And I was like, I wonder who owns that land. So I literally like went on the land registry, found out who owned it. They had a postal address. I sent them a letter. Eventually I get an email back from this guy who was the son of the guy who I'd written to. And it's obviously like a land magnate who buys up plots of land and then sells them. So I bought this land off him for more than I thought I should have paid for it. But, I consulted various people and they were like...
So what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it?
I'm just going to turn it into a garden. Like, it's 47 metres long, my garden.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's something like...
That's big.
Yeah, I know. It's something like 4.7 metres wide as well. So it's like just a big, long tunnel. But... yeah, it was that area has been used as a dumping ground for like God knows how long, and I don't have at the moment, even though it says I'm supposed to have it on the deeds, I don't have rear access. I can't get around the back. I have to take everything through the house, and it's not that fun.
I can imagine.
I need to sort that out. Because ultimately I need to sell that house for more than I bought it for and move somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a big project in itself.
Yeah. So I need to keep cracking on with that. But God, it's...
time.
Yeah, and sometimes like very frustrating and stuff like that. And yeah, just, trying to do as much as I can myself and, occasionally making a bit of a mess of it and having to either do it again or which is just like fine, like again, because it's learning, it's learning, it's all learning, it's learning new things. But I need to,
a lot of patience.
And I need to get that absolutely sweet as a nut, like I say, so I can then sell it and then make a bit of money and then move somewhere else.
Jed, lovely personal goals there, and I do hope they. I'm interested to hear how they turn out in the next few months. But we have unfortunately run out of time for today. So thank you very much.
It didn't seem like that long, did it?
No, it's flown by. Guys and girls, we'll see you next week.
Much less painful than the dentist as well.